said that he believed the fossil record would show transitional species, like the long sought-after missing link, a creature that would be something more than an ape, but less than a human. Darwin knew his thoughts about evolution would stand or fall on whether or not these in-between links existed. In fact, it was Darwin himself who warned, unless transitional forms could be found in the fossil record, the theory of evolution is worthless speculation. He speculated that when these intermediate fossils were found, they would clearly show the steps from one species to the next. That means there would be fossil records of very strange-looking creatures. Fish with beginnings of legs, reptiles with primitive wings, and ape-like creatures with human characteristics.
Favorite is a platypus. And the reason the platypus is my favorite is because it was discovered in 1797 and sent back to the British Museum, and the British scientists actually thought that some taxidermist had cut up all these different animals and stuck them all back together again, because they got this funny looking creature that had a bill like a duck and a beaver-like tail and hair like a bear and web feet like an otter and claws like a reptile, laid eggs like a turtle, feeds a shung of milk like a mammal, has spurs like a rooster and poison like a snake. Now, if you found an animal like that, you'd think somebody had stitched all these animals together. But in actual fact, this is a beautifully designed little creature. And you see, the interesting thing is this. If you're going to believe in evolution and believe one kind of animal changed into another, and here you have one that has features of reptiles, birds, and mammals, you have to believe it almost evolved from everything.
The problem is, no intermediate fossils have ever been found. That's right, you heard me correctly. Not a single intermediate fossil has ever been found. There's not even a single example of an intermediate fish. Surely you've seen them in books and magazines and on TV.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
But when examined, the results have always been the same. The physical evidence, the scientific evidence, shows that the creatures are always nothing more than a member of a complete species, and not a transitional intermediate species.
Every major kind of fish that we know anything about appears fully formed, no trace of ancestors, and certainly no trace of transitional forms linking these major kind of fishes to one another.
Evolutionists still insist there are transitional forms, then contradict themselves and say they just haven't been found yet. Dr. Leo Hickey of Yale University.
There's really no problem finding transitional forms.
Then he says just a few minutes later,
evolution acts in very short bursts. It doesn't leave many transitional forms behind.
Preston Cloud, an evolutionist and geologist, who said,
there are so many transitional forms between species that we must often fall back on statistical analysis to separate one from the other.
Then said,
the problem of transitional forms is one that all honest paleontologists have a problem with. The geologic record is incomplete.
And over again, it's the Bible that's been shown to be right. Because the Bible tells us that God made distinct kinds of animals and plants to reproduce after their own kind, great variation within a kind. You see that in natural selection, which is not evolution, by the way. It just operates within a kind.
Dr. Colin Patterson of the British Museum of Natural History wrote to aerospace engineer Luther Sunderland, "I fully agree with your comments on the lack of direct illustration of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would certainly have included them. I will lay it on the line. There is not one such fossil for which one might make a watertight argument. It is easy enough to make up stories of how one form gave rise to another, and to find reasons why the stages should be favored by natural selection. But such stories are not part of science, for there is no way to put them to the test. Fossils may tell us many things, but one thing they can never disclose is whether they were ancestors of anything else."
Evolutionists realize that they can no longer rely on the fossil record to give them any support. So what they've done is they've come up with a very crafty alternative to the Darwinian concept of evolution. They call it punctuated equilibrium.
The theory says evolution is stable for long periods of time. Then new species suddenly come into being, and others immediately become extinct.
If evolution was true, we wouldn't be concerned about the extinction of species. There'd be new ones being created. We don't have new species. We got deterioration. We have all kinds of species that no longer exist.
Evolution is not only based on faith, but blind faith at that.
The truth is, there are no examples of evolution in the fossil record, no intermediate transitional species. Out of the millions of fossils found in more than 150 years, the only thing we see are complete species.